So, weiter geht's mit dem Talk von Benjamin über End2End Testing. Ja, schönen guten Abend. My name is Benjamin Neu, and I'm currently working for Point of Media, and our main front-end UI system is AngularJS. And since we're going to build a very user system, it's very important for us to continuously test our system and to automate wherever possible. And therefore, I'm briefly introducing you to Headless End-to-End testing with AngularJS. First, a little motivation why you want to test software. I mean, which is pretty obvious is you want to achieve high quality, so you need to test often and don't want to test manually all the time. Then it really helps you with refactoring. We have an agile development process, so we refactor a lot. And due to our automated tests, we all the time know after refactoring that everything still works as expected. And we introduced the test also as some part of our specification documentation process. So we saw our developers spending a lot of time on documenting in our Confluence system what they did, and nobody reads it. Yeah? And testing, when the tests fail or when you look into the test, you get a good idea of what the code should actually do, and you don't have to read through bunches and pages of Confluence. And the integration of new developers gets a little bit faster because you can let them code and you can test their code with our existing tests. So normally we don't let them do new stuff but refactor things of the old code, and so we still have a feeling of, is something really broken or is it still working? What you should expect is that you spend a lot of time on testing. Here I wrote 30%. In our team it was more like 50% for some time, and now we are down to 30% because we have some basic test structures and things established. But it's a lot of work, but it's mandatory because we will have a huge growth of our teams. At the moment we are 7 people with 5 developers, and we'll probably have 10 developers more this year, and so we need to be prepared for the team scaling. One thing with the buzzword bingo on the front slide I wanted to disclose is the difference between unit tests and end-to-end tests. So unit tests focus on basically testing small parts of an application. This could be a single function, like a black box where you put in some data and you know what should come out and you want to test it. Still, that doesn't help to ensure that a lot of these functions play well together. Therefore, you need end-to-end tests. A good picture is from the car industry, where they test all the different models, so wheels, seats, tires, everything is tested. Still, in the end, they have a complete car crashing against the wall to be sure that the whole system together works as expected. Yeah, and what is also very good to know in this end-to-end testing that you should try to really test like a user would use your website. I'm giving some examples later. You see how I emulate the way of a user using with our system. Okay, how's the stack looking? I tried to get some animations in here, but now it's only the PDF version, so everything is here right from the beginning. We start from left to right. So we have Jasmine, which is giving us some kind of structure for writing our test. It has some syntax like describe it, expect before, after. You see it in the code. It's just some kind of syntax. What you then need to actually use that syntax is Protractor, which is specialized for AngularJS. And Protractor is not only a standalone test runner, but also integrated into Angular itself. So Angular, when you start it in the web browser, it provides like a testing API which can be accessed by Protractor. It's under the hood. You normally don't see it. And then you need something to really control the browsers, and therefore you need Selenium. Selenium is quite out there for a long time, I guess 10 years or so. It gives you the capabilities of controlling browser windows on a single machine or a group of machines. So you can use it to test against Windows, Linux, macOS, and all various browsers on these machines. And yeah, browsers in the end, I mentioned it, you need to control the browser to emulate what the user does. Okay, so how does the code look like? I did some more zooming in here. So it starts with getting a Protractor instance. This is actually Node.js code, but it's kind of the same JavaScript, so should be very easy to read. And here we see our first Jasmine syntax describe, which is the wrapper for my complete test, and I can see it in the test reports later on. Then the first thing I do is letting Protractor get a specific URL I want him to get. In our case, this is started on every developer's machine, so first he inserts the IP of the local machine, which is somewhere else in the code, and gets our application on port 9090. And then I check if the title of that page I just loaded is like the expected 1 point of view. And in the next step, I found a button here, and you can select items by various ways. Here I use the ID. You can also find it by CSS class, by XPath, by ng model. So you first select an item you further want to work with. That's why I store it here in the element variable. I find this button, which has the ID, test user menu, register, and then I simply submit a click like the user would click on that item. And after that, I check if the title is still as expected point of media and that the URL changed to our register page. So we can even test if the linking here is working like I wanted. And then, that's where it's getting more and more interesting, is to filling out forms and checking if form validation is working and if you really can register on our page. So for this testing, since I don't want to empty the database at all times, I create a username with a random number and insert this username to the username field of the form, then a password, which I have to double input here, and then I search for the register submit button, submit this form, and then I check, after I submitted this button click, I check if it's accordingly moved to the start page and check against the test headline here. So what you don't see is a lot of things happening under the hood which Protractor provides for you, because Angular, as you all know, has a lot of asynchronous components. So you normally, in old times where I wrote Selenium tests with Java, I had to put in a lot of timeouts to wait for the browser to change to the new site, to change a view. And you won't never really be safe that the timeout is too high or too low. And therefore here, Protractor, we don't see anything. It's under the hood handling these things via the API I mentioned. So it's taking care of that Angular has resolved all the events in its event chain and accordingly rendered a new view after you clicked. Yeah? And that's a really cool thing because you don't have to care about it anymore. Questions so far about the syntax?
Yeah, I just saw the first it has no expect, so normally in Jasmine it would just fail because you have no expectation in it.
Yeah, here you don't need to have.
You don't need it?
No.
Just get warning. Doesn't fail.
You don't even get a warning.
Okay.
I use the it's more, you see it when I'm doing the headless testing in the end. So when I don't have a UI telling me what's currently happening, I use the it's to see these different steps. And you could normally organize it that you have a describe on top level and then the it's for every expect like you tell you want it to test. But you have to see it, you need it. I'm currently fine with it that way. Yeah.
So it's you can't do that asynchronously, like two tests at the same time or something like that. It's always from top to bottom. It's
yeah, it works to all things.
so
I don't actually know if you can do. You can probably do some things in parallel.
Yeah.
But
to the browsers and also the same browser, different instances. So we do it, for example, for a responsive website, to have it open at the same time with a mobile size and at the same time with the desktop size.
So that's a question what you want to achieve. The layer on top, Selenium, gives you the option, what he said, to do the test at the same time in multiple browsers. But I don't know if you want to do it the same browser window you currently have open to fire multiple events to that browser window.
I just want to understand. So Protractor is using it from Jasmine to check when this is done, then do that, or
the Jasmine in this case is more, think of it like a language specification that you have in it.
okay.
Protractor is actually Protractor executing it.
It's an API to Selenium.
Yeah, Protractor is uses the WebDriver API of Selenium to fire the events.
So it's not Jasmine knowing about the async handling,
Yeah.
it's the WebDriver API. And this is by every line by line. It's waiting for async action.
That's also not completely correct, but
Yeah.
close, getting closer. It's a very detailed topic. I try to answer a lot of things, but I was told I have only 15 minutes. That's why I really put it here on the slides at a very high level. Yeah.
So just for this expects and helps to have this expects.
The it and describe
Expressions.
statements also go to Jasmine, as well as the expect, yes.
Yeah.
And what is actually executing the code and communicating through Selenium with Angular, that's Protractor. So Protractor itself describes it as an AngularJS testing framework. I more like see it as a test runner of the Jasmine code I'm writing.
To make things even more complicated, I'm sorry, you can use Protractor without AngularJS. They use it to test ASP.NET applications.
Okay.
So no, more important
Yeah.
to me. We have some old stuff.
Yeah.
Really great, yeah, to have one common stack.
Yeah, you can use it like Karma or something.
Maybe I show the first demo I have where I show what's happening actually in the UI, which makes things a little bit more tangible. So I did a little video because live it's always, you never know if it's really working. So, okay, we have 3 windows here. Just the browser, there will be coming a new browser up once I'm starting the test. On the upper right corner, I logged into my developer machine. But you don't see it very well. That's it. I printed out the configuration of Protractor currently, and you always specify an IP address of your Selenium machine currently running and the port it's running on. So at this point, I run Selenium standalone in this console on my local Windows machine. And so all the things which a Protractor wants to execute it will be executed on my Windows machine. And I tell it which browser to use for the testing. You can specify here in an array a couple of browsers in parallel. So Firefox, IE, Opera, Chrome, everything you like. So I'm mostly testing with Chrome and Firefox, but currently Firefox is having some bugs. So the Protractor Firefox interaction is not really working perfect, so I'm going for Chrome. And here I have the reporter, which after the test is finished, writes an XML file with the test results, which I read in and with our build server, which I show you. I just run it. So you first have to start the Selenium standalone server on your machine. It's pretty easy when you use a standalone jar. Then I show that I'm using the IP address of my development machine. And then you simply, if you want to execute all tests in the current folder you're in, you simply have to enter Protractor and will execute all *.spec.js files. So here I'm starting the test, and it opens a new Chrome window, goes to our start page, inserts everything, and that's goes. So that's why I redid this thing in debug mode to at least leave the browser window open. You can simply enter Protractor debug and the configuration you want to use. Then you need a C for starting the test, and a C for every breakpoint where you want to go to the next step. So it's actually really fast if it's working properly. And this is the thing, this is on my machine in our local system. Maybe when we test it on Amazon or something, it's slower. And normally now, then I would have introduced all these timeout things, which Protractor now takes care of for me. So what's obvious, you don't only want to have it run on your local development machine, but also somewhere in your development process. So therefore we come to the topic of this speech.
On development mode, we have experiences with the Chrome only mode or some drawbacks.
So testing only in Chrome.
So for us it was a pain to load the Chrome, and the Chrome only is faster to initialize it.
Yeah, I have currently some issue pending with the Protractor team, and they also asked me if our application is running slower in Firefox per se. So I'm running into some issues there.